All right, we're recording. Gina, if you could tell us who you are and what you do to
Hi, well,
start us.
thanks for having me. My name is Gina Tron, and I am a writer. I am an author of a few books. I write mostly memoir. Just recently got into poetry, journalism, and true crime. But yeah, I guess I'm a cross-genre writer, as they say.
Awesome. And is there anything lately that's kind of like stoking your interest real hard that you can actually talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've really been. Well, right now I'm working on another memoir um, that is like about like a more recent time in my life that I'm enjoying, but still so daunting to work on, as well as like this like other this like cozy I'm working on because I have to like flush out all the scenes. So whenever I'm like feeling just overwhelmed and tired about it, which is a lot, I just go back into poetry. I'm just obsessed with poetry now. I have like multiple poetry books going right now, and I'm just, I'm enjoying like trying to push my own boundaries with them, or like try to do things that I wouldn't have thought I could do with poetry before. Like I'm writing, I think there's like one section of a poetry book I'm working on now called Mostly Hate Sonnets. I wrote about mostly men I hate. So that's been fun. So I don't know, just been, a lot of it, some of it's like, I'm like, I don't know if it's good enough to get published or even appropriate, but it's a lot of fun. So
I love that idea so much. I remember like a few years ago at one of my MFA residencies, a couple people were talking about, see, Andrea Rexelius and Adrienne Kalfa-Palou. I hope I'm saying her name right. They were talking about sonnets and how that whole uh, version of poetry is definitely male dominated with male themes and like, the male gaze and all that other stuff. So I think it's absolutely appropriate, and I actually really want to read it.
of
But
course.
they were talking about, oh gosh, I can't remember. They wanted to dismantle that part of it somehow, because forms generally, they were saying, were usually fairly patriarchal in nature, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I got inspired to do that because I took like a 23andMe, and you know how it shows like relatives, like famous
Mhm.
relatives you're related to, which is like, so far back you're not really related to them. But it said I was like related to this like Italian poet guy who wrote sonnets, but it sounded like he was just a stalker because he wrote like um I forget how many, like hundreds of poems about this like one woman. And I got really like, I'm like, I want to do like a backwards version of that, which I ended up not doing because it's way too much work, and it'd be really creepy if I wrote that many poems about one person. So um decided to write about a bunch of guys that I don't like, instead of
Yeah.
like guys that I like or obsessed with or have any affection for at all, just like guys that have just repulsed me in my life. So I started doing that. And there's a lot of them, so I could just go on and on with that.
It's like book five, 100 more. So it's about men's I hate. Oh yeah, that's gonna be great. I think that's amazing. And like I think we're in a time too where like the issue of appropriateness is just like like I just like, fist unicorns all the way, because like I think a lot of us have been told what appropriate is, and I don't know. I don't fuck that.
Yeah, and then you see some of the things that you're like taught in school that are like technically appropriate, and they're horrible. Like they just like perpetrate like really bad ideas of what a relationship should be or what love is. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, possession, or,
Mm-hmm.
basically romanticizing stalking, or
Mm-hmm.
like, just the standard old like guy gets, wants to possess a woman and will do anything until she finally like gives in. Like, there's so much of that that's like in like, high school, middle school teachings that,
Yeah.
and then let alone what's like appropriate for like the regular market. And like, and then you write something that's like slightly off of that, and it's like considered um like nobody can handle that. But yeah, so I'm glad that like we're living in a time when there's so many people that are finally like flipping that
Yeah.
that that horrible narrative. Or just like, even just regular standard poems that you read in like in grad school and stuff. Like just I thought grad school was really good about doing other voices but white male voices, and they were wonderful about that. But
Yeah.
just in general, like there's like the standard poems are that people are like the average person, maybe not writers, would like know about, or like still kind of pretty objectifying to women.
Right. I think about literary citizenship a lot, especially mostly with grit in my craw about it. I actually just did a little diatribe about that the other day, a little bit, about some of my issues with it. And I think that's part of it too, is just like, we have this whole literary canon, much of which gets ignored. And then, the classics or whatever, the important people are like usually the dead white dudes. And then as a extension of that, the cishet white dudes in literature programs, they seem really loud and stuff, and are always the first to volunteer to like, I don't know, put their work out there or get it anyway. Just like, I think about that a lot, even at that level, at academia level, and it feels pretty fresh that um, our interests in academia are becoming more contemporary and also deepening in like all the vast amounts of literature that's available to us that
Yeah,
isn't just all these dudes and then a couple of chicks that happen to like make their way through pretty loudly. So um I don't know, more of that, more
absolutely. I think you were talking about that a little bit with Hillary too.
with the, oh yeah, our frustrations with
Yeah,
some of that,
I was
like,
like, yes.
yeah, sometimes I'm afraid to talk about that stuff because like I've spent a lot of my time in my life being nondescript just to try to survive.
Hmm.
And so like I do admire folks like Hillary and also you who are just like, no, we're gonna push against the grain, because it's like, well, what else am I gonna do, right? One, because no one has left anything else left but myself by myself, so I'm just gonna do the thing, right? And it's just like, uh, I've had these ideas for a long time and not always been able to stand up for myself and say them. I don't know if this is your story, but this is kind of my story, and it's just like, unfortunately, this kind of drive has come a little late for me. But now I'm in this spot where I'm just like, no, these things actually did happen. You did say these things. You're breathing down my neck, et cetera, and on and on. And I have an experience that is very, very important. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I'm like, if I do say so myself.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like I came into writing a little later too. I think I didn't try to start becoming a professional writer or like getting really published until I was like, I think I started thinking about it when I was like 25, but I didn't
Mhm.
fully start really trying until I was like 27 or 28.
Mhm.
And at that point I had really low goals, where I was like, my main fantasy, which I used to fantasize a lot, was um, was that I would get like a short story published in an anthology.
Yeah.
Um, and that was it. I had no higher goals than that. I just didn't think that I was capable or a good writer. I mean, I was always, people thought of me as creative, but I wasn't really like lauded. Is that the right
Mhm.
way to pronounce it, for my writing until like way later. And it's interesting because yeah, I really had to push through it, and nobody was like, nobody was in my life was telling me, oh, you should be a writer or you should do that. And trying to do it at first, I just I got so much rejection, and still get, we all still get rejection, but
Yeah.
like, because I wasn't doing it right, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. So I just kind of learned through trial and error, and just editors being like, what the hell is this? Um, or some people, it wasn't because I didn't go to school for writing or journalism. I went to like film school, and then later I went to get my MFA in like my 30s. But
Yeah.
I, but yeah, it's just, I did it really all myself. And I'm not saying that I could have asked for help more. It's just not my thing. And I'm maybe better about asking for help in life now, only a little bit, but better. But it was, I get annoyed, and I shouldn't be, and I guess resentful, which I shouldn't be, when especially men like You know, as soon as I get any success, like,
Mm-hmm.
or like get an article published in a bigger publication, immediately I get like messages from, like, within minutes of it going live, I get messages from dudes being like, you know, some vague thing about the article, and they're like, I would love to pick your brain about how you got this published. I would love to pick your brain about how you got that. And like, I don't really, you know, women um that have asked me for like help or whatever, I've just been so, they've all been really cool about it in a very genuine way, and like very nicely asking instead of like expecting. And most of them are like people that I know
Yeah.
anyway, as opposed to the dudes would be like, you know, barely know them, if I know them at all. And there's kind of like this attitude in some of them where like they feel like, oh, you must have known someone to be able to get that published, or there,
Mm-hmm.
you must have done something or something
Mm-hmm.
weird. Where I'm like, or I remember, well, it was a different story, but I remember someone like alluding that I must have slept with someone at Vice or something, and like I was like, I haven't met any of those editors in person. No, yeah, none of
Yeah.
those editors in person. um, yeah, just weird stuff like that, that there's just like this bullshit that but yeah, you know, it's always, I feel like it's always the dudes that were the loudest,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
I've gotten that a lot too, like in the music community and writing community, different places, and just like, how did you get that? Why did you get chosen? You know what I mean? Like, and it's just really interesting. And then a lot of the same cats who are like trying to offer ways to help that aren't actually very helpful to me, that actually I don't need, you know. They're not actually helping. They're just trying to get in somehow for some reason. So in that way, I guess I know I'm doing something right. That's how I try to do it so I don't get like totally rageful, because I've definitely been in those places like, like, you
Right.
know, these guys like, and I don't know how to make them to see or anything that, and I don't have energy or headspace or shouldn't have to, right? To be like, I'm working my tail off and sometimes harder than some of these dudes, you know, not always, but sometimes. And like, don't come to me with that. Like, why did you get that? As if I'm not doing my work and as if there's no quality in the work that I'm doing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like, I mean it's definitely like, I mean with anything like insecurity on their part, but I have no sympathy for that insecurity. But like, you know, I do feel like it's, and I feel like this is like even more than just gender related, but like
Yeah.
sometimes people just have, maybe it's because of the way how they were raised, but mostly,
Yeah.
but men have also been raised this way more than women for sure, that they just, they think that they deserve something because they tried.
Yeah.
They deserve like accolades because
Hmm.
they wrote something, and like they get frustrated because, oh, I wrote this thing that I love and nobody's picking it up and it's not getting any recognition. And I guess the way that I go into it, I feel like a lot of women go into it, where I write things, I don't expect anything. Like
Hmm.
if it gets published, I am like thrilled. I mean, yeah, sometimes I'm like, I get disappointed, but I'm not like,
Yeah.
oh, I worked hard on this. Why isn't the world seeing how much I care? Like, why, like, why isn't everyone like, where's my prize? Like, where's my this? And the times that I've gotten published, I'm like, kind of, because I've set the like, I don't know, it's low, you know, I try not, I feel like I'm very confident, but I'm also, you know, we all have self-esteem issues. I don't expect anything. And I
Yeah.
think I still have some self-esteem issues like everyone, where I'm just kind of like, I'm surprised that people are reading my stuff at all, to be honest. Like, I just am thrilled like that. And you know, still very indie level, but I just, you know, I write things, I put them out, and I don't have any, I don't, I'm not going to get angry at anyone if I feel like
Mhm.
it didn't get picked up, especially if it's something that's like a little weird, or like non-standard
Mhm.
writing that's like, you know, not, it's not getting picked up by like a big house, and
Mhm.
that's fine. And I'm so lucky right now to be working with like the publishers that I have, because they're so like, they just get it. They're just great, and I'm just, yeah, I'm so happy about it. But like, yeah, anytime I write something that I just think that there's a lot of men that I have talked to who, you know, they write something and then there's this like frustration that, oh,
Yeah.
nobody's like seeing my genius, and you know, um I just tell them like, write more stuff, like
Yeah.
just write more and keep putting stuff out there, and maybe that'll get picked up later. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
stop getting they get really stuck, and then or they'll like send it to like two editors or two literary journals, and then they'll get like they'll put all their heart into like that, and then
Yeah.
they get rejected, and then they like can't move forward or something.
They're like holding their breath, until and if. And I noticed that about you too. And I think that's something that journalism teaches us with like deadlines and things like that, is like, oh, writer's block, that doesn't exist because you have a fucking deadline, right? And you
Right.
have to keep going. And even if that article or essay or whatever you wrote was kind of not really your favorite, you have to keep going. And I wanted to tie that into, like, you just had like 2 or 3 books published, is that right? Like all in a
Yeah.
row at the same time.
Yeah. So it's funny because in 2018, late 2018, I was like, it was like the worst, one of the worst, well, I wouldn't say the worst time of my life, but it was definitely not a good time, where my boyfriend and I broke up, and like we were
Yeah.
talking about getting married. And then like maybe it was like 10 days after we broke up, my literary agent broke up with me. And
Oh, damn.
I was like, oh, okay, relationship, that sucks, but oh, I don't have like that like career thing to focus on. I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
I was like, my writing career is over. I mean, my relationship's over. I don't like, there's nothing in like the foreseeable future for me to work on. There's nobody's, I had my day job at Oxygen, and that was great. That
Yeah.
is continues to be great, but like I didn't have like, my own projects that were going on. So yeah, I mean, I've been working on stuff since then. I mean, the one of the books was already written before then, but been working on trying to get things out there. But yes, so I'm so happy that I'm in a place where I have 3 books forthcoming, and
Mhm.
I just never thought I would see this happen again. And I've never had this many books out like that are like in the works at once. So yeah, I have a book of poetry coming out in November called
Yes.
7. Yeah, with
Can
the
you repeat the title of that? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Star 67. Like, when you would call, when you would, speaking of stalking, like, you would prank call people star 67 so that they wouldn't be able to track your number if they
Yeah.
had caller ID. I don't know if that still exists or not, but
I could try it out later.
yeah, they call you. Yeah, so I have that, and got picked up by Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, and Freddie, who's the editor there, the editor in chief, he's
Yeah.
like, he's amazing. He just really like, he works like in a restaurant, and he just runs this poetry press, and just really curates the poetry. Like, I just love all the other poets that he picks, and I was shocked when he picked me too, because I really respect a lot of the poets that he's like curated. So it's just good to work with somebody who's like, he's not like, he's art focused and not like money
Yeah.
focused. So, and it means a lot to me that you know, that he likes my work so much. And then
Yeah.
so I have another book coming out with them too, called Employment, in April. I think
Nice.
April 21st, which is about all the different jobs I've had in my life. So I wrote a poem for every job, and
Nice.
I submitted that to him after Star 67. I was like, I, I was like, I was gonna shop this around, but I wanted to see if you were interested first, and he said yes, so that's great.
Nice.
And then yeah, but then I have a memoir called Suspect, which is about my time in high school, where I was like accused of wanting to shoot up my school.
Oh my
It's such a
gosh.
weird thing to always. I have to always say that with a straight face. It's just such a it's still such a weird thing to say, because it's very normal for me. It's like part of my life, but
Yeah.
just to say to other people, it's a school shooting. They're like, huh? If you can, there's like a Vice article about that with me, that it's like the shorter version of it, like way shorter.
Yeah.
But that's like a memoir that I was working on, with trying to get published with my former agent, and it just wasn't selling, and it's people were interested in it, and
Yeah.
but it just, some people said that they were worried about the topic, or they thought that people just wouldn't be interested in that, or that it's like, it's like something that America's too numb to
Right.
really read about. And I have no idea. And then other people just didn't like my voice or the writing. So the normal stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I submitted that to Tarpaulin Sky Press, and who I love. And as we know, Stephen Dunn introduced me to them, and and they are amazing. Stephen Dunn is amazing. All the authors that they have chosen are amazing. And yeah, so I submitted it to their contest, their book award, and I just was, you know, deep down hoping I would get it, but like it was like a fantasy. Like I would never, you know. So when they told me that I was in like the short list, I was like, oh, awesome.
Yes.
When I found out I won, I was like, what? The fuck. So yeah, so that's coming out. I don't, you know, I don't know when that's coming out exactly. We have to edit it maybe next year or whatever. There's no, we don't have a date yet, but I'm thrilled that that's going out in the world, and I'm also terrified because it's like a longer version of, you know, that story. But you know, I think the Vice piece, if you ever read it, it's like, not to say that I'm more of a victim in it, but I guess kind of like, I mean, there's not enough time in that, and I tried to make it more nuanced in that piece, but it got kind of cut out because, understandably, because it's not, for like a short article like that, there's not enough space to go into like all the intricacies of that situation. But I, you know, I don't want this to be like, I don't think the book is going to be like a, you know, poor me situation. I think in some regards, but I really wanted to tap into like some of the darker thoughts I had, and like how I was sympathizing with school shooters, and like, you know, how people can get radicalized online and stuff like that. And you know, I want to be really honest as possible with those topics, which is really hard. And also there's stuff that you know, I can't really write around, which I hate, because like I don't really want to have to write about certain people from that part of my life, because I don't have any ill will about them or whatever. But I can't like, I can't like skip over it. I can't be like, and then I got mad and then this happened. Like I can't, like I have to like make scenes of certain things that happened. But I think writing it at this time in my life, when I don't have any anger or weird feelings about that time, or at least not like in the way that I used to, I think that there's like a lot of distance, and like I yeah, it's not like, yeah, it's, I think it's, I'm in a better headspace to write about it than I would be in my 20s, where I would have been maybe trying to prove something or prove that I was like innocent or whatever. But now I'm like, this is everything I'm trying to, yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'm thinking too about like the kind of conjunction between journalism and memoir. And I'm wondering how that affects your work. How does journalism affect memoir? Because it does teach us to be more, you know, like 5, 8, 10, 10,000 feet back, you know?
Yeah, it has taught me a lot, I think, because yeah, I feel like that was one of the complaints of some of the bigger publishing houses about this book coming out, is that there's a lot of distance between me and my own story, which I think in part is just my own disassociation. Yeah, I'm like really can go really open and deep about stuff, but I think that there is just, I think I am a little bit, I think I do disassociate, or I do put distance between me and certain things. Like I can express how I feel or felt, but I don't really like, I don't know, get emotional or something. But but journalism has played such a bigger part, and I think has doubled up on that, where, I mean, like, so my my first memoir, You're Fine, is about my time like in a psych ward / rehab in my late 20s. And some people have pointed out to me that it does feel like a work of journalism in a way, where even though it's about me and I'm writing about my own stuff, there is like a lot of distance, and it's like kind of, for the most part, where I try to be like, you know, impartial, or like just try to show things without giving too much of my own input. Although I think I did it, the first version actually was very, there was a lot of there was a lot more of my own insight, and I think the editor, she did a great job of helping me cut that out so that people can make their own decisions, and it's not like, let me show you why I hate this person. I mean, it wasn't like that, but you know, I think that I try to do that, because I think that you know, and as journalists, we're taught to not, you know, I mean, everything's a little bit biased
Yeah.
and whatever. There's always a slant to some degree, and it's really hard to control that sometimes, especially, you know, if you're writing for a more liberal paper or more whatever paper, like it's often not even the reporter's fault. But you have to write within that. But yeah, so I think that I have been taught, or I've trained myself to not give too much of my own input, and that really goes into memoir too, because you know, I think that it is more powerful if you just let people come to their own conclusions, and even if you want to try to guide them to a conclusion to some degree, like if you tell them how they should feel, people are not going to like that, and they're not going to trust you. So
Right.
if you like, you're like, I want to show it all to you as much as I can, and I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I can, but it's my own life, so of course I'm biased, but this is
Yeah.
how I think it happened. And then people can come to their own conclusions. But memoir is weird. Like, weird is not the right word. Memoir is really challenging, and I'm still confused about it, the voice part of it. And I remember in grad school trying to ask some professors about this while I
Yeah.
was working on this book, where because I had so many editors complain about voice, and not complain, but that was like the reason that they rejected it. They said that the voice wasn't clear enough. And you know, whenever I would like heighten my voice to have more opinions and to be like more spicy, I guess, I don't know, like more talking directly to the audience, I was told to stop doing that. But then when I made it, when I brought it all the way down and it was like completely like journalism, that people didn't like that
Yeah.
either. So I don't really know what the medium is. So I kind of, and I'm waiting, I know, I'll see what my current editor says about it, and I'm open to anything. But I'm personally just very confused, because I read some memoirs where the memoirist is telling you exactly how you should feel, and it's just the style of the voice. And then other ones, it's completely like they're just deadpan. And
Mm.
I think it just depends on your choice. And the memoir I'm working on right now, I have like a lot more voice in it, because I think I've been I'm trying this. You know, I'm still building scenes, but I am like talking directly to the audience in like every chapter.
Yeah.
So I'm trying it. I don't know. It's still hard, but yes, journalism definitely plays a giant role in how I treat memoir, and I don't know if I can take it, if I can unpluck it at this point.
Well, it sounds like I'm wondering if you're rounding it out with the poetry, and then of course you have like the foundation in film, which is very scene based, and then poetry. There are so many other possibilities there. Like you can be super clinical with poetry and tear things apart or whatever, and like look at things that way. And poetry obviously is very kind of known the most for how deep into our emotions it can take us. So I'm wondering how that affects your memoir too, or if it has started to yet.
It has really, really helped a lot. Like, I look at my first drafts of that memoir, and it's just very, I build a scene a little bit, but it feels almost forced. Like, I'll do
Mhm.
some descriptives, but it's, you know, but after I tapped into poetry, I feel like the language is, I don't want to say flowery, but there is more like, it flows a little bit better, and it's just more like um not stream of consciousness, but there's some of that in there, like where it's like, allegories and stuff like that, and things that I hope don't seem too forced, but it makes it feel less straightforward and
Mhm.
more, color and whatever, and smells and all that stuff, all that good stuff. Yeah, so when I went to get my MFA at VC, at Vermont College of Fine Arts, I went to a cross genre program, and I was the least interested in poetry. I couldn't have given a fuck about poetry. I would I would make fun of poets in my spare time. I was such a jerk. Like, I was so like, and I think in
Wait, this is
part because
fair.
I resented them, because I felt like I couldn't write poetry. I don't know what my problem was, but and I did write poetry when I was younger, but
Mhm.
it's not really good. Um, but yeah, I think that I felt the same way about some poets that I did about some film school people, which I still
Mhm.
found them pretentious, and it's my own problem, and it's not, it's whatever. It's a fear that I have about myself, really, where I'm afraid of coming across as pretentious, and I'm sure I do sometimes. So I I yeah, so I started that, and I was more interested in like the nonfiction and fiction, and it wasn't until my second year that I had a professor, Juliana Baggett, who's like a great writer and just a really cool woman, and she's like a best-selling author and stuff. And I was very intimidated by her, and but she, after an exercise in class, she pulled me aside and she's like, or wrote me an email, I don't remember which one, and she was like, I really see like, something in, I think she said she was like either surprised or like impressed that by some of my whatever thing I could tap into with the poetry exercises. And she
Mm.
was like, I know you don't write poetry, but you should really try. And she gave me this like exercise, like that was beyond class, where she said, just write 3 poems that have like a theme to them and bring them into class. And I did. And yeah, and she and some of the poetry students were like, gave me really good feedback, and I just never went back. I just kept writing since then. I think that I had this like, even though I was reading so much poetry, well, I
Mhm.
think that leading up to that, I was changing my mind about poetry, because I wasn't educated on it, and I just thought of it as like, oh, this is something that has to be like deep. I was thinking about like those dumb white, like all these like really like white male poetry poems that I kind of hated, and
Yeah.
they were just like stuck, or like Shakespeare, or whatever, like things that were like just not. I'm like, I don't want to do that. But as I was going through um, school, through my grad program, I was like, reading poets like AI or I, who like she writes from the point of views of criminals, and she wrote like a 1991 poem of from the point of view of a cop who had
Mm.
just like killed somebody, and that could have been written today. He was like blaming the media for not, you know, the cop in her poem. And
Yeah.
she was like a woman of color writing this in like the 90s, and she wrote like a bunch of stuff in like the 70s and 80s too that was like way ahead of its time, and just like, I think it was considered smut at the time, but she got like a all these accolades like by the
Yeah.
90s for like her amazing work. And she's been by the most influential to me. And then there was like other poets too. I think Diaz is her last name.
Really?
She wrote a book about her brother who died of heroin, and I liked that book a lot too. And I was like, oh, there's like so many more things you can write. You can like, I think I like the theme books a lot, or just like, I don't know, where like, even if it's really abstract, if it's like about a subject and I can kind of understand like what it's about. So yeah, where was I going with that? Yeah, so after, yeah, like, I think that my work at that, until I really started writing poetry and getting serious about it, I
Yeah.
was writing a lot more straightforward, where like, and just, it was, the language wasn't as good, and I can see that now. And after I started writing that, even though I wasn't putting those poems like straight into the memoir, or straight into like my journalism, or even like my writing at work, like I started to see some of it like dripping into my work, where I just could like more easily make the language a little, I don't even know the right word, I
Yeah.
don't want to use poetic, but just a little bit shinier, I don't know.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking, there was this article that came out last year when all the NASA photographs came out of the black hole photograph. I don't know if you remember that. And in the New York Times, I can't remember who wrote it, but I actually pulled some lines from it for some fountain poetry for some stuff I've been working on, because they were so poetic, and they were also poetic in like a contemporary sense too. Like just really beautiful writing happened in there. And it also reinstilled that awe for our constant search for outer space and stuff, and incorporating just kind of some other knowledge, like kind of mythic knowledge and knowledge of the constellations and things like that in a science article or in a reportage of science. And I always think of that because a lot of like freelance gigs I've had, like where it was like maybe a little more journalistic, the writing is kind of the same every time a lot of times. And then it's really fun when you can have the license to like let those other things seep in, because I mean, we have our experiences and we have the things that we're seeing that we're excited about and stuff like that, and we can relate them in a certain way and it still be journalism. I don't know, that's where my brain went with that, and it just excites me because I mean, we're always thinking about audience no matter what we're writing, and how are we going to get people to read to the end of that article? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, how are we going to get them to read all of the information that we just took our time to publish?
Right.
um, and that I think about those things a lot, and I love that you're like a multi-genre writer, because I mean I am too, and it's like each thing can inform the other thing. And I remember when I was working on, not to make this about myself, but like it just reminds me of like working on staff, you know, for like what I called a regurgitated news site. And we had to write a certain way. Your dog is very cute. and
Interested.
and there were a bunch of like writer drones, you know, and they are always patting themselves on the back and stuff, and just like, I'm really good at this, but they're good at this one thing. Like if you ask them to write any other thing, probably they're not going to be able to do a very, you know, they haven't had practice writing a lot more, you know.
Right.
um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so good to exercise like different ways to yeah, to make like
mhm.
the viewer or the reader interested, and like, and yeah, and just to flex different muscles of your writing brain. Yeah, because if you're doing the same thing over and over, you can get stagnant and just, you know, then you try doing something else and it's like so hard.
Mhm.
And I feel that way too, like with you know, I'm trying to finish a fiction book, like the cozy I'm working on, and like if I'm just doing my oxygen articles, which are like journalism all day,
Yeah.
I if I haven't been in like fiction world too long, it's like it's hard. It's really hard, and I get frustrated, and I have to like. So I'm trying to dip into it every few days.
how how do you make that shift? Because I recognize this. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 days to get out of the former mindset and into the new one. And um, yeah.
Well, um, not probably not as well as I would like. I don't think that the way I do it to myself is very healthy, probably. To be honest, like, yeah, I like for example, not like 2 weekends ago, I had no plans on purpose because I was like, I'm gonna write a whole weekend. Whenever I say this, it's just like I know that the weekend's gonna end with me beating myself up because, you know. And
Mhm.
I did write for like, I guess like probably total like 10 hours, which, but I
Nice.
wanted to write for more. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was trying to do the transition from, you know, someone like all of us who is just kind of burnt out from this year, etc.,
Hmm.
and even burnt out from my own day job, which but not usually, to just like going directly into like other writing. And but it was like 99 degrees or 104 that weekend too, so that did not help. But it, you know, it would just be a lot of me staring at the computer and then writing a few words and then getting distracted, and then, you know, for like 2 days, and then by the third day I did finally get into it. And then since then it's been a little bit easier to get back into that project because I guess it was like the 2 days of like, you know, go, you know, putting me in a bag with like hot water into like cold water, and like just took a while for me to get used to it again.
Yeah.
But I also pushed myself too hard, I think, too, where like the guilt, I guess the guilt. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the right answer to that.
I mean, there isn't a right answer, I don't
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
but
There's
it's
probably a
just
healthier reason, healthier answer than mine.
maybe I something I've been learning. I'm interested in this question, obviously, selfishly, and also like with my students, like I always try to have like a module on like creativity and like trying to emphasize like that we need that space. There's this space we have to create for the creativity to happen, because we do live in a world that's like go 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 all the time. And then any of us who freelance, like you do this a lot more than I do. I break up my freelance time between massage therapy and teaching and a whole bunch of other crap too, which isn't necessarily just writing. And so I'm not the best at organizing for freelancing per se, because I'm like trying to, piecemeal my life still. But it like creates a lot of like everything hits at once when it hits sometimes, and you still have the deadlines and like you still have to do it. So now I'm losing my train of thought, but that's creating that space is really important. And I think there isn't a right way to go about it, because there isn't like a special formula. There's just like a special formula, loose formula, I guess, like and then we have to figure out how our brains and bodies and life work kind of within that loose formula to be able to create the space, to be able to be in the right headspace that is going to be conducive for whatever kind of work we're doing. I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
But
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Try to make the right that space for it. That is the hard thing.
mhm,
Um, that yeah, like just getting yourself in the right headspace and like I don't know. Sometimes even like create like changing the space that you're in.
mhm.
Like right now, I can't really go to coffee shops as much, but like
Yeah.
sucks. But sometimes like I'll like move. Like I have like a few different workspaces in my place. Um, and to work on some projects, I'll actually sometimes not without even thinking about it. And now I'm like a little bit more aware of it.
Hmm.
Like I'll go to like different areas to work on different projects because I feel like that area is better for that project somehow. Like my day job, I'm like by my desk, and then I have like a little desk in my room,
Hmm.
and I work on that for one project, and then I'll like lay on this like chair for another for the poetry project.
Yeah.
And I think because poetry comes easier for me, or like it's like less because I don't have to build scenes and dialogue. It's like okay for me to like lay down, but other things I have to like make myself like
Yeah.
be at work. I don't know.
I think that's cool. And thank you for sharing that stuff, because I know like a lot of times sharing different parts of process is like very personal.
Mm.
And also it feels like we should have an answer or a right answer, and it's just like, and it might not be the same for us every single time either. So I don't know. I just want to say I think I get those things, and um I don't know if any of that helps. Auntie Mika, my Auntie Mika hat is on more and more these days.
Hearing your perception of it helps too. It's like even just talking about this right now is like very inspiring. And like I'm like, oh, I think I can write better this weekend because it's just funny. Like actually, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Where like I don't know if you feel this way,
Mm,
but I think that when you're in your own head too
mm,
much, I mean, I guess with anything, but especially with like the writing process, you can just like start to feel like what you're thinking doesn't really make sense or is not logical or it's just like I
mhm,
don't know, it's just like stuck in like a vacuum
mhm,
where I'll just feel like really unstable when I'm like writing alone and like not talking to anybody about it. And like the second and I'll be like avoiding wanting to talk to other people about it or anything. And as soon as I hop on a phone call or like something like this, I'm like, wow, I sound pretty normal. I sound pretty stable. How? Like, and then you're like, okay, this is like, especially when you're talking with like,
yeah,
you know, other writers or artist type people. I was talking with a friend just 2 days ago, and like, we were just talking about how lucky we are to have so many friends, um, just acquaintances that are artists and writers, because I feel like we can get some of these thought processes with each other, and it's not like trying to explain something really difficult to someone. Because I have some friends who I love to death who just try to explain some of these issues to them or just challenges, and they think they're just going to think I'm, they're not going to like judge me for it, but I just think they won't understand it, and it's extra work for me to try to explain it to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. I get that too. Like a lot of times where I'm just like, I don't even know if my brain's working, don't know if I'm smart. I don't know, like, I don't know if, like gobbledygook up in there and I just, and then I do something like prepare for a class and then even running up to the class, going up to the class or writing something on paper is what we're talking about. Like any of those situations where I'm just like, and then the thoughts actually come out in some kind of way that like is like, whoa, that just really, do I know that? Like this came out of me? Am I sure? Like, that was in there. Sweet.
It is so weird. Yeah, like for example, there's been some days in recent month where I just felt so, I don't even know the right word for it, but just not good. Not
Right.
feeling great, and like feeling like detached and just like very like everything I'm writing is not good. And then I have to write some articles for work because, that just has to happen. And
Mhm.
so I wrote it, and then I looked back at one of them I wrote during that like bad time for me, um, bad emotional space time or whatever. And I looked back at that article because I needed to cite it for an update on whatever thing. And I looked back and I read it, and it sounded so good. And I was like, what? Like at first I thought that a different author had written it, a different one of my colleagues had written it, and I was like, oh, I'm like, oh, they did a good job with this. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, I wrote this. And I'm like, and it sounded like if I was an outside person reading it, I'm like, that I knew what I was talking about and I was excited about it or like interested in it. But at that moment, I was like really forcing myself to because that day I was just having an off day. So it was, so it's interesting how like once it makes it into written language or once we like speak it, it just seems to be more confident than when it's inside of us.
Yeah. I've experienced that a lot. Um, what else? I don't know, like what other things do you want to talk about? It could be writing or things that are related. Halloween's coming. I don't know. I guess I'm interested in like the true crime stuff a little bit. We haven't really talked about that at all. But and it's kind of starting, I'm kind of starting to see maybe how you've gone in that direction. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. Like,
Sure. I mean, so before I got that job, I'm like a contractor for them, but before I started working for Oxygen, I mean, I was already doing a lot of true crime stuff, I guess, in a way, like,
Mhm.
and I feel like I've always been obsessed with that kind of stuff. Like, I loved, this was like the first book that really got me into true crime was like Anne Rule's Stranger Beside Me, which is
Mhm.
like she was writing about Ted Bundy before he was caught, while working alongside of him, um, doing work. Like they were working together at a suicide. Amelia, what do you think about Ted Bundy, Amelia? Amelia, come here. Um, so yeah, that got me into that. But I had always been interested in like, I mean, darker stuff like that. Let me grab her. Oh, she doesn't like it when the neighbors do anything. Apparently, they're not allowed to do stuff. Yeah, even like in high school when I was like writing about, or not writing about. I mean, a little bit, I guess. Well, around the time that I got in trouble in high school, I was writing, which I'm sure did not help anything. I was writing I think we had like a history. I found this the other year. A term paper. We could write like about anything, and I chose to write it on like mass murderers. Although I got an A on it, but I really should have gotten an F because I included serial killers on it, and that's very different. Um, but like yeah, I've always just been interested, and not like in a way where I'm like, wow, these guys are cool. I've just always been so interested in, I don't know, like things that you're not, that people are obsessed with, but they don't really talk about like they talk about the murders themselves, but they don't talk about like the stuff around it or whatever. Like
Mhm.
I was talking to somebody about this recently, where it's like, you know Oh, I was talking to the last podcast on the left. They are a true crime podcast, and they talk about all the weird details and interesting details about the serial killers that that are not like about they don't focus on the gory murder part, because that's like it's been done and it's like giving too much power to them. I like that they talk about the aspects of these people that make them like suck, that make they embarrass them. They're like, oh, he had this habit, oh, he talked like this, and he was trying to be, and he would drink wine when he would kill them because he thought he was like, fucking Silence of the Lambs guy. Like, they're making fun of these guys, and you can, it's those details that like, you know humanizes them in a way where it takes the monster thing away from them, and I like that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been fascinating to me, because we build
Yes.
up murderers in America and abroad too, but like to like be these, you know geniuses, and like these like monsters, and like most of the time they're just disgusting, like sexual deviants. Like, it took me a while. I didn't even realize until I was a little older that like all these, like most of these killers, like this is like a sex thing. This is like a deranged sex thing. Most of them, not all of them, but they're talking about like serial killers and stuff, like,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I've always been, so before I got the job at Oxygen, I was covering, just because I was just so interested in these topics, I was already covering quite a bit of murder stuff, or true crime stuff. Like I was, when I was in Denver in like 2014, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, um, I I wrote about the Aurora movie theater shooting a bit, and I covered the, I think, his sentencing. And I wrote a few articles with the parents of one of the victims, who I went out to dinner with a few times and stuff. And I was, I felt, and one of the things that we were trying to do, what they were trying to do and ask for my help through writing, was to, this is before, this is slightly before this became a little more of a mainstream thing, was to try to get, people to stop naming the mass shooters so much. And I've been trying to work on that for a while. Now it's becoming like, now that's like a little bit more like, that's like something that people have picked up on more, but I was really pushing for that. And I remember I wrote the article where they were like saying like, please stop, don't televise this guy's trial, and stop naming him. And there was
Mm-hmm.
like a big photo of him like in the article, which was like not my choice. And I felt bad about that. Yeah, so I think after I started writing about the school shooter past of mine, I just started, writing a little bit more about that topic of mass shootings, and I did like some interviews with like FBI, with like an FBI subsection, where it was another thing about like, don't name them, because it's like, with that kind of murder, that can create copycat
Yeah.
situations, because it's like, those are not people that want that enjoy killing. They just want to go out and do that, and then get infamous or whatever,
Yeah.
to some extent. Not the only reason, but yeah. And then when I was in Vermont as a reporter, I did, there was actually, when I was there back in my hometown, there was like a mass shooting there, kind of like, well, not, well, I don't know if you would call it that, but anyway, this woman, she shot and killed uh, a social worker, but she had already shot and killed three of her relatives at home.
Wow.
So I ended up covering, even though I wasn't the crime reporter, I did do quite a few stories on that, and I interviewed her daughter and stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed, I don't know if enjoy is not the right word, but that was more interesting to me than, I don't know, writing about city council and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like something that never, it just doesn't affect me in the way that I think it affects other people. Because I know I've talked to some other people who just do not like enjoy writing about, they
Yeah.
don't, they get really depressed writing about that stuff. And I never do. It just never bothers me. I can't get enough of it. Like, sometimes it's like overload, where I'm like, okay, like the
Yeah.
Golden State Killer, I covered his trial the other month, and last month. And I it wasn't like I had trouble sleeping or I was like disturbed, because I already know that people are capable of these things. But it wasn't kind of overload where I was like kind of at a certain point was getting like a little bit tired of, I was getting like a little bit overwhelmed
Yeah.
by so much going on right now. But yeah, Amelia, get over here. Who's that?
We need pause.
Somebody's here. Hold on. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
So yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So yeah, I've never really like. It doesn't really bother me to write about these things. I love it. Like I feel like I continue to want to write about that. I mean, yeah, I think sometimes like just because I write about it at work all day, like it can be like overload, but it's never like it's never like I'm disturbed by it, but sometimes I just feel bad that I can't dive deep into any of it because I have so many things to write about that I feel like I'm just like skimming the surface of it, and I really like to dive deep into it more, which is not possible. It's just not possible because I can't spend like hours and hours researching one article. So sometimes I so that's the only thing that I get frustrated with a little bit, but that's nobody's fault. That's just work. But I love that stuff. And I think I do incorporate it into, I guess, Suspect, the book I'm working on, is kind of true crime. Like, I mean, it is, yeah. I mean, it's not, no, I wasn't, yeah, it's definitely has true crime elements. And then even some of my poetry that I'm working on is a little true crime-ish. I feel like I have a few that are based on crimes or people I know who were murdered or whatever. So,
yeah,
I try to, yeah, it's just that's like, it's so interesting that like females are into true crime too, because, you would think, or you would have thought years ago, or I would have thought that it would be males, but women love that.
Yeah, all but 1 of 5 of the students a couple semesters back, 3 semesters back, who wrote about serial killers were female, were girls, and they all mostly started at the same place. So I really appreciate this like talk about, and that was the part with me that always like frustrated me, is that there's always like this tendency to kind of almost idolize those folks. And so I try to encourage them to look at the psychology and some other things surrounding it. So I really appreciate that you talk about that, like the podcast you were talking about that like humanizes them, and also just looking at it from different angles, instead of kind of sensationalizing the actual act or succession of acts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's like, I think that's the one thing about it that that I think that true crime is like evolving into something where it's more victim focused, or like more, it's just like, yeah, it's not as focused on like the kill count, or like the, oh wow, look how scary this guy is, like that, I think some of that stuff has to be like included, but I think that, focusing on, the victim, like, for example, Lost Girls, which was like focused on the Long Island serial killer who's still unknown, but these were all sex workers who were basically just ignored in the media or treated like just terribly, like, and that was not that long ago, like 2010 time, and now there's like a film that's like, showing the mother's struggle of one of these missing women who were, they found her dead, and just showing like, because this is part of life, and it's unfortunately like, crime, we have so much crime in this country, like just exploring like human stories through that can make people that are going through these things feel less alone, because I think that there is like a separation of like crimes, or like big crimes, and like regular life, which is not really true. And I think that, and that's part of why we kind of turned some of these serial killers, etc., into like monsters, except because we don't want to talk about like, we don't want to talk about the real stuff about it. And so we're just like, oh, well, that's, he or they or whatever is crazy and they're a monster and they're evil, and that's that. And I'm not saying that we should understand them in the way that we should be empathetic towards them, but I think we have to understand, like, no, like, that is just 2 steps above that rapist. Like, you know, this is human. This is they are human, and that's scary, but they are us, and we are pretty shitty. We are pretty bad. We are pretty horrible. We do horrible stuff all the time. And like, that person's no better than that like priest who like molested kid. You know, there's just like, we really try to like, you know, we're just too like, we're just not nuanced enough yet. And I think that true crime can help us understand like the nuances of how human beings are, like not just good and bad. Everyone's, not everyone, but a lot of people have good in them, a lot of good, and then a lot of people have a lot of bad, and there's just, it's just like a gradient. And I think it's just so easy, and this has always been something that's like been of interest to me, is like, and I see this evolving, like, you know, through true crime, is like, you know, just like the more gray areas of people. Yeah. I like to think about. Like, I don't like to be like, oh wow, well, he was, you know, I don't like when the victims in general are, or just are hailed as too perfect. I tried to pitch an article about this a while ago, and I don't know if it got, it did not get picked up, because it's hard. I don't want to say that victims shouldn't be portrayed as good, and I think that they should, but I think that sometimes victims are portrayed as almost so good that they don't seem real, and that makes people who might be on the fringe hate them. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think
like,
so. Yeah.
Because, and that makes them not identify with the victim. It makes them identify with the killer, who seems more complex or whatever. That's something that I've noticed, and I don't know. That's just something that I feel like.
Oh, please
I feel
keep
like
pushing for that.
yeah, we're just like such a Puritan nation where we have to like, well, if they died, or if somebody is a good person, they have to, you know, they cannot have ever done drugs. They have to be married with like, and I just see that, you know, that those are, especially like middle of the country, like stuff like that. Like, it's just kind of like a lot of people, like they really want to see that the victims are like good, all American, whatever, like, and often I could be like, I don't know, I'm sure they were good, but I don't think that I don't think that anyone is like that or that perfect. And if anything, I would, you know, I was talking to actually the parents of the girl who died in the Aurora movie theater shooting, and like they were telling me about her life, you know, before she passed away. And you know, I think that in the general media reports, she was portrayed as pretty perfect, and she seemed like an amazing person. But you know, they were going into like stuff about her life that made me, you know, the darker parts of her life, that I was like, wow, you know, I could have hung out, that she would have been my friend. And that's what I started to think. And like, meanwhile, before, when it was super polished, I didn't really identify with her as somebody that could have been my friend, if that makes sense. So I think that could be something that could be explored through true crime at some point.
I think that's a really provocative and important question, or a couple of questions. It's just like, why do we place so much emphasis on the serial killer or the murderer, mass murderer, or whatever, and these harm doers, and then why do we just make victims a static character, as if every victim is the same? And that, that's important. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And it's,
I think that like, you know, a lot of times that they just make the the victim is just the victims are interchangeable, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not true. And I know like Anne Rule, and even like back in the 80s, she was like trying to do stuff to counteract that, where I think it was the Green River Killer book, who he had so many victims and a lot of them were sex workers. She tried her best to like have a chapter on every single victim. And so the book was really lengthy, because I think he had like, it was like over 45 or 50 victims. And so she really tried to like, humanize them as much as possible. Given sometimes the family didn't want to speak or whatever, so it could be a challenge. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with like just the fact that we still dehumanize women. Like, because a
Yeah.
lot of the victims are women.
Yeah. And you're
And
talking about sex workers too, and there's an even deeper level of trying to disappear people who are doing that work, and
yeah,
I just want to say for the record that I think it's very valid work. There should be protections for people, and healthcare, and also ways for other people not to take advantage of what I feel is very valid work. I just want to put that on the record, that that's where I stand with that.
I'm with you on that. I completely
Yeah.
agree. And I'm still disgusted with how people degrade sex workers. Like, I have a friend who, I wouldn't even call her a sex worker, but she does some work that could be considered some sex work. And she's just like, just seeing and hearing about some of the people's comments about it in this day, I'm just like, dude, what? Like, people are still so hard. Like, even like, I don't know, even times that I've like worn like scantily clad clothing, to this day people are like, you need to put some clothes on and respect yourself. I'm like, shut up, just don't go there. Like, I'm happy, let me be me. Like,
Yeah.
I just can't believe how Puritan we still are about this stuff. And yet, absolutely, sex worker, I mean, that's hard work, and
Yeah.
good work and important work. And I saw something funny that like a sex worker wrote the other day. It was like included in the meme, but like some person was making a horrible comment to one of them, being like, oh, you have sex for money, blah blah blah. And then the sex worker wrote back, but you have sex for free and you get left on red. I get gifts and money. So who's really winning
Yeah.
here?
Who's
And
really
I'm like, yeah, that's true. I think that there's no shame in it. Whatever. I'm pro that. And yeah, it's disgusting that basically a lot of predators
mm-hmm.
have been able to prey on sex workers
Yep.
because they knew that people wouldn't care, and
Yeah.
the police don't care, didn't care, continue to not care as much as they should, and people in society don't care as much,
Right.
and that's horrible. It's absurd. I mean, I mean, I've written about this a lot too, about my like getting like sexually assaulted, and trying to bring that guy to justice. And like, I was, you know, a white person of privilege with a job that paid well, and this happened to me, and I was still treated like dirt. I can't imagine what it's like to be a sex worker trying to report something like that. Yeah, basically, I didn't even have like a sex blog. I had like a cartoon blog that had the word slut in it, which was actually irrelevant to me. And like, basically, I was, told by the prosecution that if it did make it to trial, which it did not, that would be used against me, and to show that I liked rough sex. And I do like rough sex sometimes. I don't care. Like, it was irrelevant to I was like, what does it have to do with anything? Like, if anything, that would make me less likely to report him, if I like, or you know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
I was into that stuff, why would I report some random guy who did that to me? That's something that I liked. Like, this is not, yeah.
Yeah. I hear a lot of these kinds of stories, for sure. And and we're still having these conversations. Like it's almost like, yeah, I, I, you know, they're not my stories to tell, so I can't tell them, but like, it is so overwhelmingly, like aggravating isn't even the word. It is unconscionable the way, this happens. Like people aren't, you know, we live in a country that really wants retributive justice, and that's not true for most of us, especially if we're, you know, like in these situations of assault, of sexual assault. There's rarely, I feel like there's rarely any real change. The perpetrators still get off. Um, they're still, yeah, I don't know. I'm like breaking down because it's like, it's such a like, it's like one of those topics where it's just like, I literally don't know what to do. And I know that something needs to be done. And I
I
am
feel
really
like
sorry that happened.
oh,
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's totally, yeah, it's, yeah, I feel that way about so many issues. And like,
Mhm.
I feel like, I feel like a lot of people right now in general feel like there's so many social issues that want to help with. And I just feel like powerless. And I feel like trying to do stuff with, and then as you know, as Americans, we're so overworked. We're
Yep.
so like drained. And I just feel like it's what I'm doing is not enough.
Right.
And then it's like, you know, working so much and trying to stay mentally healthy and then also
Mm.
trying to fight these things is like so frustrating. And yeah, I actually had like a rough time when I was back in Brooklyn last year because I tried to like get the court paperwork or the arrest report or anything from like my case, and like I guess it's been all sealed up and I
Yep.
just don't have rights to it. But he does, I guess. Or it's like, or I need to get permission from him to get it, and that
Yeah.
just made me so mad, and it kind of like yeah, re-traumatized. It was like re-traumatizing, and then I like tried to. I tried to actually wrote to some legislatures about it, to some Congress, to some lawmakers about it, and they just never wrote back, and that's made me even more mad. Uh, so yeah, you know, it's like you know, yeah. But then again, anytime I've written to some lawmakers about like, you know, Breonna Taylor or whatever else, like
Yeah.
they never write back. That's whatever. It's just I get so mad. I get so mad about these things where I'm like, what am I paying my taxes for? Like,
Right.
if I can't, like, I've never once, you know, I mean, okay, the roads get fixed, the gas, depending where you live, but like, uh, I've never even been like humored trying to like talk to like a lawmaker. I think in Vermont maybe there's less people you can they'll write back. My friend used to work in politics there, so I know she wrote back to some people, but
Yeah.
she made sure people got written back to. But I don't know. It just feels like it's just throwing things into like the abyss, and I don't really know what
Yeah.
it does. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that, I think we're all in that boat, and it's just like, um trying to, you know, like we do in journalism, right? We have to fine tune our questions constantly, and like try to figure out what the right question is to ask so we can get the fucking information that we need. um, it's like, how do I get on to the other side of this wall? Like who else is playing in this conversation? Will they talk to me? You know, are they going to send me a document that's all blacked out, that where I can't read it anyway? You know, like all of this kind of stuff. Like how, like what are the questions, and then also, you know, if you're not totally gonzo, like how do you protect yourself? Well, even if you're gonzo, like how do you protect yourself? Because there are lots of different interests in these conversations. Um,
Yeah, yeah. You know, I was thinking about the other day. I'm like, you know, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that has this idea. It's like there really needs to be a class taught to kids so they understand how media works at
yes.
the age, because people do not, and it's not their fault. They're just and I didn't understand how the media worked until I guess I've been working in media for a very, very long time,
Yeah.
but but different, but even still, like as somebody who been working in television production since I was like a teenager, I still didn't understand how like journalism worked until I worked in journalism. And I don't think that should be, I don't think that should be right. Like, I
Right.
think that we need to, especially now, because people have like, you know, for the obvious reasons where people distrust the media so much. And if they see like a spelling error or they see something wrong, they're like, it's fake news. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. People need to understand how journalism works, and so that they can actually understand the world around them, because I think that the average person, and it's getting worse, like just doesn't understand how it works. And then they attack people like us. I remember working in Vermont, like making very little money as a reporter, and like, and which is fine, but you know, people don't understand that like small town reporter, like local journalism, which is so important to keep people accountable. These
Yeah.
reporters are making like 25 grand a year or less.
Damn.
And like, and they have their name in the paper, and like they get death threats and stuff pretty regularly. Like, I don't think that people understand, like they have this idea of like what, like blue, like reporting is still kind of like a blue collar job in a lot of ways, because you
Yeah.
don't get paid that well. And you basically, you know, I don't want to say risking your life, but especially nowadays, yeah, like, you
Yeah.
know, reporters getting shot by police during protests and stuff, that
Mhm.
they, so maybe it's safer to be in a foreign country reporting on a war, because the reporters get treated better than they do in their own country when we're not at war.
Damn. Yeah, thank you for bringing up those points. I hate that I'm like we're at the end of our time. And if you want, we can always do a part 2 also, because these are obviously really things that are really close to home, and I feel like we didn't get to the meat of some of the other things I want to ask you and talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but is there what I really want to do to close it up is have you tell us like how can we like keep tabs on the work that's coming out, the work you're doing, how to support you, and things like that.
Sure. Well, yeah, you can check out my work at ginatron.net. Um, uh, or and you could go to Vegetarian Alcoholic Press, their website. My book Star 67 is available for pre-order, and then my Twitter is, I think it's at underscore Gina Tron, and then I'll post, you know, stuff like stuff I'm doing or stuff that you can support me. But yeah, Vegetarian Alcoholic Press is one spot now where you can buy my one of my books, and soon another. And I also have a Goodreads if you ever feel like leaving me a review. On
Yeah.
one, uh, and yeah, yeah, you could just Google Gina Tron, and you can probably find some pretty interesting things about my life that uh, I probably wouldn't bring up on a first date, but have actually on a first date before, which didn't end well.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm gonna go ahead and close this up.
Okay.